the thesis for the debate is Mirza Gulam Ahmad a prophet? I'm not going to be responding to any of the things that he has said. I will do that in the rebuttal rounds, which will come after our opening statements, for me to address some of the points that has been made. So the first thing I want to go over are the following. So we know this, that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has claimed that at one point that he's a prophet, though it's interesting in the way that he puts it in the book known as Hakikat ul Wahi Zamima. In pages 64 to 65, he says, I've been named by Allah as Nabi, as prophet, by way of metaphor, not by way of reality, Hakikat. So whatever you take it as, whether he's an actual Nabi or he is a metaphorical form of a Nabi or a prophet, he is still a prophet regardless of what the usage is. And according to the Quran itself, and Surah 3, Ayah 3 through 4, and then of course it says, go to the Gospels and even the Torah to confirm the message that Muhammad had preached. And even the scholars will affirm this matter, but of course, as he mentioned, that there's probably some Arabic that was different. But the matter of the fact is that going to the Greek and the Hebrew manuscripts show that there has not been corruption concerning the one verse that's important, that is Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 22, which says, when a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, the thing follows not, nor comes to pass. That is the thing which the Lord has not spoken, but the prophet has spoken it presumptuously. Thou shalt not be afraid of him. In fact, it even goes further to say that if he is a false prophet that speaks something false in the name, he should be put to death by the standard of the Torah. But of course, we're just simply going by that we should not fear or even assume that it's a prophet. So let's hold this Mirza Ghulam Ahmad to the test and examine some things that he has said. Now, again, this would probably be the only thing that will be connected to what my opponent said in his opening statements. The Abdullah Athim issue. It was more than just simply a prayer battle. What it was is that for 15 months they or for a few months actually, they were exchanging letters in a letter debate. It wasn't a speaking debate, but rather they would exchange letters to each other to debate the matter of who was true in the regards. And at the end of the debate, as what we have noted in what's one of the books that I'll be quoting from the most is a book called Ruhani Kazin, which is in English, Spiritual Treasures. So in volume 9 of this book, we hear that as a result of the debate and its conclusion, some of the Ahmadiyans at that point ended up converting to Christianity. And because of this, as we read in volume 6 of Ruhani Kazini, it says that when I humbly entreated and implored God Almighty and prayed to him to show me the details of the matter, he indicated to me that the liar, referring to Abdullah Athim, will die within 15 months. And at this point, this is referring to that he would die before September 5th, 1894, provided he does not return to the truth, meaning provided he does not convert back, or he does not come back to Islam or something like that. And then mentions that when the prophecy is fulfilled, then blind man will see paralyzed start walking and the deaf start hearing. And then he says that if the prophecy is proven to be false, I am prepared for every punishment. What's interesting to note about why that happened is also the fact that there was a blind man, a paralyzed man, and a deaf man who, towards the conclusion of the debate, went to Mirza Ghulam Ahmad saying, hey, please heal us like Jesus had healed people in the past. And Mirza Ghulam Ahmad refused. This is noted again in volume 9 of the letter. Now, in volume 13, we read something that is shockingly admitted. Though I don't have the translation, you can look it up on page 163. That's in the Arabic and the Urdu version of Spiritual Treasures. It's free online to access. That the followers of Ahmad attempted to take Abdullah Athim's life within the time of the prophecy so that it could come true. So that's why Abdullah Athim then had to also start getting security as well to help defend him from the assassination attacks, which included some people planting snakes in his room and all that. So With every new revelation then that started coming in later, that was supposed to narrow it down specifically that day, but something different would happen. It kept failing, and Abdullah Athim kept surviving, and Ahmad was proven false. But in the second page of the 9th volume of Spiritual Treasures, he claims that, well, since he hasn't passed away or died yet, that must mean one thing. Remember that he said, provided he has not returned to the truth. So must assume that Abdullah Athim converted back or converted to Islam. But there are two sources that debunk this. One that's questionable to some people, but then another that's something that you can rely on. In September 15th, 1894, in Lahore, we read this following from a newspaper article. I invite your attention to the prophecy of Ghulam Ahmad about my death. I inform you that by the grace of God, I am safe and sound. I have heard Ghulam Ahmad alleging that I have turned my back on Christianity. I proclaim that this is a lie. I was a Christian, and I have remained a Christian, and I thank God that he made me a Christian. And then, of course, you have from the son-in-law of Ghulam Ahmad himself, Muhammad Ali Khan, in a letter to Ahmad entitled Aina-i-Haq Numa. It says, today is the 7th of September, while the last day of the fulfillment of the grand prophecy was the 5th of September. I shall not repeat the words of the prophecy. I shall, however, mention the words of your revelation. And after repeating what was just revealed earlier in the beginning of this opening statement, he says, was this prophecy fulfilled according to Mirza Sahib's description? No, never. Abdullah Athim is safe, sound, and alive, and is not punished by dead to be flung into hell. I do not consider any other interpretation is possible for this prophecy than that it was clearly meant to be. It, however, sounds very ugly that every prophecy is misunderstood and had to be elaborately interpreted to be rightly understood. But then goes on to say, quote, as for the prophecy concerning Atham, it has given birth to the very masterpiece of distortion and interpretation, meaning that according to the son-in-law of Ghulam Ahmad himself, that there have been so many people that had to just distort and interpret what Ghulam Ahmad meant just so that they could protect the value of the prophet, of this supposed prophet, in what he had said. And this is coming from one of the followers of him, as well as his son-in-law as well. So that being said, there's another false prophecy. In volume 19, and I believe it's also somewhere in the Tariqi as well, that he says, God has, however, given me the good news that I shall live for 80 years or more. So he says that, okay, I'm going to live for 80 years or more, and this has been the good news that's been revealed to me from God. How long did it take? How old was Mirza Gulam Ahmad when he passed away? He was 73 years old. He did not live to be at least 80 or more years old. He died at the age of 73 when he said that God's revealed the good news that he should live for 80 years or more. So the very fact that he died at the age of 73 proves that that either he made this up or that God is false. Either way, it doesn't sound like a good case for people trying to assert he's a prophet. And by Deuteronomy 18:22 from the Torah, that should debunk already what he's saying. Another thing is also the fact that with Jesus in Islamic thought is being viewed as the Messiah and as a good prophet of God, you would assume that there's some things that is nicely appreciated about him. But according to Mirza Gulam Ahmad in volume 11 of Spiritual Treasures, page 291, he basically says that Jesus' miracles can be explained because there was some pond nearby that was the source of the miracles, and even saying that, quote, he had nothing to his credit except cunning and deceit. Jesus' 3 paternal and maternal grandmothers were fornicators and prostitutes from whose blood Jesus came into existence. Then in volume 9, page 449, he talks about Jesus' encounter with a prostitute, and it said that whenever she sat on his lap, said, quote, in that condition, the Messiah is sitting in ecstasy. If someone rises to object, he is scolded. In addition to his youth, dependency on alcoholic beverages, being a bachelor, a beautiful prostitute is lying in front of him, touching her body against his. So he's basically saying that not only was he a horny man, but he was also a drunkard, depending on alcoholic beverages. Then in volume 11, page 290, he says, a most shameful thing is that the Sermon on the Mount, which is the essence of the Bible, is Jesus plagiarized from the Talmud and pretended it to be his own preaching. Since this fraud has been exposed, Christians are very embarrassed. Jesus did this to perhaps gain influence by presenting some good teachings. So for one, he says that it's been plagiarized from the Talmud, even though the Talmud was not written during the time of Jesus Christ. In fact, the Talmud mentions Jesus and his crucifixion later. So how could he plagiarize from the Talmud if it hasn't even been written down yet in existence? And to say that even the Sermon on the Mount, which is from the Gospels, from the Injil, that it's a shameful thing and that it's the essence of the Bible. I mean, why are you then going to assume that Jesus himself, one of the prophets of Islam, is a plagiarizer and has done a shameful thing? Not only that, volume 18, he even denies that Jesus could return by saying that people are claiming that, Jesus is sitting in the heavens. How great an injustice is this? God, in keeping his promise, has power over everything, but he can never send a person to this world the second time whose first coming has caused so much harm. So it's denying Jesus' return. And at one point, though he claims it's metaphorical, claimed to be for 2 years nurtured as Mary and was raised in a womanly seclusion. Though he claimed it was metaphorical, then says that after a period of several months, not exceeding 10, he was made Jesus out of Mary. And then he insults Jesus in volume 9, page 387 by saying, "What was the character of Messiah according to you? An alcoholic and gluttonous person, neither abstinent nor a pious worshiper, nor an adorer of truth. He was an arrogant and self-conceited claimant of divinity." So he even right there affirms that Jesus' divinity, that Jesus claimed divinity, which of course that is definitely in the Gospels. And then, of course, one more thing to note is in page 22 to 23 of Jesus in India, a book that Ahmad wrote. He says the Gospel of Barnabas, quote, which should be available in the London Library, it is written that he was not put on the cross, nor did he die thereupon. We could very well point out that though this book is not included in the Gospels and has been rejected summarily, but there is no doubt that it is an ancient book and was written at the same time as the other Gospels. Now, the problem with this is the fact that it is actually not the dated in the original Gospels. And if Allah was supposedly revealing these things to him, he would know that because it's a 16th century document, a 16th century forgery. And as scholar Cyril Glass tells us in page 78 of the New Encyclopedia of Islam, the following, quote, "As regards to the Gospel of Barnabas itself, there is no question that it is a medieval forgery. A complete Italian manuscript exists, which appears to be a translation from a Spanish original, which exists in part, written to curry favor with Muslims of the time. It contains anachronisms which can date only from the Middle Ages and not before, and shows a garbled comprehension of Islamic doctrines, calling the Prophet Muhammad the Messiah, which Islam does not claim for him." And I will assure you that definitely my opponent here would not believe that Muhammad was the Messiah, but that it was Jesus or Isa ibn Maryam. And an example where you see that it has to be a 16th century document is the language that it utilizes that would have been foreign to a person in the first century. And that is in chapter 38 of the Gospel. It talks about the year of Jubilee being celebrated every 100 years. But according to the traditions that we have, it was celebrated every 50 years until 1343 AD, when the Pope at that time declared and decreed that Jubilee now is celebrated every 100 years. So with a minute left, I just want to point out that these things alone, these facts that we have demonstrated, should show that what we see from Mirza Gulam Ahmad is a very bad misunderstanding of history, trying to claim something is ancient when it's not, having two false prophecies that he has made about himself, attacking the Messiah figure in both Christian thought and Islamic thought, biblical and Quranic. And these alone should demonstrate to us one thing, that Mirza Gulam Ahmad, though he claimed to be one, by certainty, he was not a prophet of God.